welcome to the Kansas Commission on Veteran Affairs training. Today, we will be going over how to read the financial reports. The first part of this video will go over the tabs originally in the monthly workbook. The second part of the video will go over the tabs introduced in January 2024. I will have this video broken out into chapters on YouTube, and so you will be able to click and go directly to the section that you need. So let's get started. Up here in this top section on the By Fund tab, it will show all of the revenue that you have received so far this fiscal year according to the fund. It's like here for the Warrior Home and the State General Fund, they received $4 million in July, but the state has not granted them any money since then. Same for their fee fund. They received $200,000 in July, August, September, and October, and they carried forward from last year $50,000. And if you scroll down, this section here will show you the expenditures. And again, since it's on the By Fund tab, it will be grouped according to fund. And we can see they've spent $150,000 out of SGF in July. In August, they spent $300,000. In September, it jumped up to $525,000. And if you hover over it, a note will pop up to explain why that increase. And here we can see that that is due to the third pay period in September. And then also of note is each one of these that has the little red triangle has a note. So on these funds, if you don't know which one that is, you can hover over it in order to show the Medicare fund and give a description of it from our budget. If you scroll further down, this section shows you what is available according to the accounting date within SMART. And so one of the variances you might notice is there may be more expenses coming out of the accounting date than the journal date. And what that is due to is there may be $150,000 that the Warrior Home spent in July that actually got input into SMART and then vouchered out and put into a check in the mail. So it counted that. But then down here, you'll see $200,000 because on the last day in July, on the 31st, maybe they didn't put a voucher so that it counted against this, but it didn't actually become a check yet until August. And so then in August, that amount will show up. And then here's also where you can see encumbrances. So we can see that right now they have $750,000 encumbered in the State General Fund. In the fee fund, they have $400,000 encumbered in this fiscal year. And then they still have $75,000 encumbered from last year. And then down here, you can see how much the total is remaining with the obligations taken into consideration. And this is the By Type tab. And this one has it's real similar to the Fund tab. As far as revenue, it'll show the exact same amount for revenue. But where it differs is on the expenses. Instead of having $150,000 for fee fund and $200,000 for State General Fund, it'll show you by the expenditure type. And so here we can see salaries. They spent $650,000 in July, $800,000 in August. In contractuals, they spent $215,000 in July, $115,000 in October. And this is a good way to see not just which fund your money is coming out of, but also where your money is going. Are you spending it mostly on contractuals, which would be things like agency nurses, or is it going mostly to salaries? What's happening with the money? This next tab here, projects, this one is where your State Institute Building Fund projects will be located, or sometimes we'll have a fund that's just directly from the federal government, these 3,000 funds, and this is where you can track those. And this is similar to the By Fund tab in that it breaks out the expenditures according to the fund the money is coming out of. This next tab here, the budget tab, also breaks out by fund for the revenue, and then the expenditures are according to type. And so we can see that we're expected to bring in $208,000 in July for the fee fund, and we're expected to expend $769,000 total in salaries and wages. And these are just expectations. It's not reality. This is just what we are guessing will happen. And this is also what we record in IBOs at the end of each fiscal year, and we'll update it. This one actually got updated just a few days ago after the Department of Budget came out with their recommendations, and it will be updated again when the governor makes her recommendations. And over here on this next tab, this is the budget to actuals comparison. This takes everything that we have guessed throughout the year on this budget tab and compares it to where the home or veteran services or cemeteries actually is. And so here we can see that this warrior home was anticipated to bring in $166,000 this month, but then they actually only brought in $100,000, so the $66,000 lower than anticipated. However, if we come across to the to date, they're actually $70,000 to the good overall, because funds like the per diem, the long-term care per diem, and Medicare are exceeding expectations. And if you scroll down, it's the same for expenditures. Salaries and wages, they were expected to expend $769,000 this month. They only spent $600,000. Same with the year to date. They were expected to expend $3,461,000, and they only spent $2,850,000. And for just a quick at a glance, up here you can see the just total budgeted versus actual for month and for year. And then the next one will be this by type average. This is where you can go back and see, okay, in fiscal year 2020, how much did we spend on salaries or contractuals? And this helps with predictions on, say I want to know in February, how much will we be spending? I can look here and I can kind of see the trends and see that in February we dropped there, here it went up in 2023, but the 3 years before that it actually dropped. And so we can use that to kind of make predictions on how our salaries and wages or contractuals or commodities will ebb and flow. So it's real handy for that. And this is the same thing, except for revenue over here. This one will show, hey, back in 2020, in February we brought in $207,000, but then in 23 we only brought in $185,000. So it's also just good for predicting. And same with census. We can look at this census and see long-term care veterans. What months do we typically have fewer veterans and what months do they increase? We've actually looked at this before to see studies on months where we had a high case of influenza. What happened to the numbers? Same with COVID. How did COVID impact these numbers over the months versus years prior to COVID? When you open the newest version of the financial report, the very first tab is actually new, and it will be titled Notes. And this contains anything that is specific to your facility that I have noticed when going through the financials that month. It could be good things that are positive, such as the per diem payments. They've been caught up and everything is good to go with 3232. Or I could be drawing attention to, hey, this fund is getting pretty low, things such as that. On this, you'll notice that we've added some new tabs, like the project expenses, and then we've also added salaries and wages, contractual services, commodities, capital outlay, and a tab for other, which I'll be going into later. But again, this is just where you can open it up each month and see just a quick brief of anything I think should be noted. This tab, this is new. This will be your project expenses. And these amounts will actually match, this total here will match the Warrior Home projects. In this example, it doesn't. I'm actually using the example I created for the earlier version of the project reports. But in yours, this total here, the 150,497 will match this over here. And what this is for is on the projects tab, you can see what you've been spending. You can see, I've spent $162,000, but you don't know what on. And so that's where this tab comes in. And this you can see, hey, for maintenance and repairs, we've spent $130,000 so far. Same with dom maintenance and repairs. And then if you have a project going on, one of those A-01, whatever, this is also where it will show up. And you'll be able to see in project A-01488, we've spent $1,000, $2,000, $100,000, however much. And that's where you can track this at. This tab is revenue details. It is similar to the project expenses, except it's grouped by fund instead of agency use code. And this is where you can see, okay, 3232, what did our money come from? Care and hospitalization. Same with fee fund, but then also in fee fund, we've had to refund a few residents. This is on this tab, the negatives are actually good. These amounts coming in. It's the positives that are actually going out. Meals and processed foods, oil, gas, and sand royalties, and so on. You can really dig down and see where your money is coming from here. And then on the Salaries and Wages tab, you can see exactly what you are paying out for each area of salaries and wages. Public and retirement system, classified regular, and so on. And you can even sort it so that you can see where most of the money goes. Like so. Now on contractual services, this right now is actually collapsed. But if you wanted to see, okay, we're spending, $677,000 on staffing and recruiting, I want to know more about that. You can hit the plus and you can see CNAs, RNs, CNAs for January. All of these are the expense descriptions. But that's why we have it collapsed at first, since it's so long for each one. These are going to be things like staffing and recruiting. This is your agency nursing, cell phones, equipment rental. Most of your services will be on this. Bank fees, that sort of thing. And then here for commodities, it's the same as contractual services. It will be for drug and pharmaceuticals, food and human consumption, household supplies, things along that line. And here we can see that clothing for the month of December, not clothing. Here we can see that pro scientific supply for the month of December is lower than any of the other months this year. So if we wanted to see why, we can look here. And you see there were no bandages bought. And then several of these items are not appearing in December. So you can just get a better feel for what is being purchased and when with these tabs. Same with capital outlay, same idea. Same with other. And this is where it gets a little different. Instead of being grouped just by account code and fund and expense type, these show agency codes, which are how you can track projects and just other areas of spending. And so it'll be, dietary salaries, contract labor. Down, if you see one with an A-01, that's a current project that's being worked on. Those sorts of things. This is really handy for knowing, again, projects like on the project details tab, but then it'll also show you laundry and nursing salaries and those sorts of things. Like office supplies and printing. It just breaks it down into a different level. And then the last tab is obligations. And this is money that hasn't been spent yet, but it's on a purchase order and it's already encumbered on a fund. And it says, hey, we haven't given AT&T $800 yet, but that's what we're waiting on. You can see under fee fund, Alliance, we have a PO sitting out there for $4,600 from fiscal year 23. Anderson Knight, we actually have a purchase order from fiscal year 22 for $1,164. P1 Service was saying, hey, we're going to give them $11,000. Again, this isn't money that has spent yet, but it has been encumbered on a PO according to the fiscal year. That's the end of the financial reports. I hope everything has been explained. If you have questions on anything, feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help. My email address is melissa.ford@ks.gov, and I hope you have a wonderful day.